Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. I am back after a few technical difficulties. Man, oh man, my programs crashed. Everything went down. I spent the last few hours recovering, but I am back. We got some Q&A to go through. I'm going to cruise through this a little bit, and I want to just encourage you to remember that these are Q's answers, not my answers. So I don't want to do a whole bunch of trying to interpret what Q may be trying to say. I think you guys are smart enough to figure this out, and I think a lot of you already know, if you've been following Q for a while, that Q's done this before, and sometimes disinformation is provided amongst the information that's being disseminated here. So without any further ado, let's go. 26:05, 42 minutes after the hour at 6 p.m. Q kicks off the Q&A. And then 26:06, 42 minutes after the hour at 6. How do you know the future, Q? Q says control. Well, I'm not sure how the libertarian in me feels about that. But I think what Q is saying is, look, we've been planning this thing for 3 years. This whole entire map has been planned out. A lot of this, like I said in my last video, we may not realize what's going on until much, much later. But it does seem when you've got all that kind of time and you've got all that preparation put into it, it does kind of help you get a glimpse into what's going to happen in the future. And I think that's kind of what Anon is talking about. 26:07, 43 minutes after the hour is 6. And Anon asks, is Seth alive? Being Seth Rich, former DNC staffer. Q says no. Well, that is heartbreaking to know, but I think that we all kind of realize that he was murdered. Now, I want to point out that Matt Couch on online does a lot of great work, whether it be on Twitter or YouTube, wherever you may follow him. A lot of you probably already do, but he has dedicated a lot of his time into researching what happened with Seth Rich, and he was the one that earlier kind of broke that Donald Brazile, former DNC chairman, former DNC campaign manager, Donald Brazile, was at the same hospital as Seth Rich at the same very time, which was the wee hours of the morning. Very, very suspicious. So I do hope that we get some closure, at least for Seth's family. I would really, really love to see it happen for Matt Couch to break that story. He's been working so hard and so diligently on this, but it does look like Seth is indeed passed. Let's go ahead and move on to 26:08, 43 minutes after the hour of 6 p.m. What were in the envelopes? And the Anon is referring to the envelopes that were passed around during George Bush's funeral. Q says, our promise to counter. So there was a message there. Looks like Q is acknowledging the fact that there was something to what we were talking about a few videos ago when we were talking about these envelopes that people were receiving. And if you haven't seen this, go back and watch some of these highlights of the George Bush funeral. You'll see that there was these envelopes inside the programs. Now, the curious thing, considering Q's answer, was that Mike Pence's wife got one of these too. So it remains to be seen what exactly this counter is and who all will be affected, but it does seem like Q is aware of what was in the envelopes. Let's move on to 26:09, 43 minutes after the hour of 6. Is there a plan in place for after Trump? Q says yes. Ooh, I'll bet you I know who it is.
President of America! President Camacho!
All right, I don't know about President Camacho. What do you think the plan would be in place after Trump? Donald Trump Jr. maybe? Not really sure. But I will say this. I think after seeing this whole situation over the last 2 years play out, it would not surprise me if this gives rise to new, young, conservative minds. And I don't just mean because of the Trump influence, although I do think that's a big part of it. But seeing what's going on down at the border, seeing the meltdown in the mainstream media and the unhinged left. I think a lot of people have gravitated towards new platforms and new people to listen to. And I'm not just talking about the mainstream media, Candace Owens or Charlie Kirk or something like that, although I think they're good examples. New, young, fresh-minded conservatives, not neocons, not warmongers or anything like that, but, just true nationalists that are willing to listen, willing to play the politics, and, who knows how this will all play out, but I can't help but think that seeing what we've seen over the last couple of years, it would almost cause this wellspring of new young minds to want to do something about it. Maybe I'm just hopelessly optimistic, could be, but that's my take on it. Let's move on to the next post, 2610, 45 minutes after the hour of 6, will voter fraud be exposed before January? Q says no. 2019 push voter ID based on verifiable intel fraud. 2020 plus safeguarded. So we know this has been going on for some time, right? And we knew that it was happening in 2016. There wasn't much we could do about it. And I think we're all starting to realize now that probably anybody who was committing election fraud might very well have already been pardoned by at the time President Barack Hussein Obama. Now it remains to be seen how all that plays out. Excuse me, but in order to keep moving forward, it looks to me like we kind of had to set a trap, which was what 2018 was all about. Now, it remains to be seen what we find out regarding that based on verifiable intel, but we're not most certainly going to see it before January, which isn't really much time to begin with, okay? So that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to see it after January, but the whole point was to safeguard on the way forward. 2020 is going to be extremely big for us, and if you guys think this is all going to happen by next month, I'm sure you already know by now that it's likely not. We're going to have to fight through this presidency, and 2020 is going to be very, very important. But I do think that your average Democrat is not going to be a real hard sell for this voter ID. I think a lot of them think that election fraud was just basically guilty on the fault of the right. So I think they're also kind of calling for it. And once we start to see some of this stuff play out, I don't think this is going to be a real tough sell. But we're just going to have to suck it up for the time being, I think. Let's go ahead and move on. 2611. Excuse me. 47 minutes after the hour of 6. Is JFK Jr. alive? Q says no. All right, well, I know this is a bit of a bummer for some. There are many people who have spent a lot of time and a lot of precious hours researching this topic. And I personally have not been one of them. I've gotten a lot of information regarding this, and I've never chosen to go into this. To be honest with you, not because I didn't believe it so much, although I don't really, but because I've just been overwhelmed and kept busy enough with the here and now with Q and daily headlines and researching other things. I haven't, gone off into it, and I knew there was a lot of people kind of working on that. They were kind of already steps ahead. So it's, what can I say? I feel bad for you if that's a disappointment for you. But that is the pursuit of truth, isn't it? Sometimes we stumble on things and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we search for hours only to kind of come up nowhere. And again, who knows? This could be disinformation too. If JFK Jr. were likely alive, I don't imagine we would know anyway. But it looks to not be the case. At least that's what Q is saying. So for those of you who were hoping, I don't know what to tell you. Just keep digging. 2612. 49 minutes after the hour of 6. What about Snowden? Q says negotiating for return. Traitor. Mission to harm NSA. Okay, well, just as I suspected. And, Snowden called out the NSA a few years ago, I guess now. And, was essentially saying that the NSA was spying on you. Here is how. And, of course, outwardly in the narrative, people were saying, oh, what a hero, great American hero, right, letting us know about all this. And in one way, I guess it sort of was. In another way, it seemed to me like a major dog whistle to all the deep state actors to find a different way to get around the NSA. But he definitely seemed to want to take it down. What was he doing out there in China? Helping them set up their own little Building 8 out there in China? What was he doing? Is he in Russia right now? Where is he right now? Is Russia negotiating? Do they want somebody in return for him? Would they maybe try to make a play for Bill Browder? Who knows? I don't want to play the trade game, but it would be very interesting to see how this all goes down. But Snowden to me does not seem like any kind of hero. I never have felt that way. He's always been a little bit smarmy for me. Q seems to kind of confirm that suspicion. Let's move on to the next post. 2613, 50 minutes after the hour 6. Q is JA being Julian Assange stateside. Q says no. All right, so this is a curious one. I'm not so sure that that's the case, but if it were the case, I don't know that I would want to be coughing up his whereabouts anyway. Julian Assange's life is in danger. I do not think, and I've said this for a while if you've been watching my videos, I do not think that he is in the embassy in Ecuador any longer. I don't think that's been the case for quite some time. I would not be surprised if he's been moved around. I would also like to remind you of a story from, it was just a few weeks ago. I showed you this video of this aerial maneuver heading, they had basically gone over a no-fly zone right near the Kremlin. And then they sort of touched down, they grabbed somebody and made off. Now, it could have just been an exercise, but it seems very strange in a no-fly zone. Now, that could have been a Snowden. That could have been a Julian Assange. Who knows? But I have a feeling that Julian Assange is in some sort of secure protective custody, whether it is in Gitmo itself. And as they get ready for new visitors, they have, through the omnibus, they definitely have the funding to build them some sort of protective custody out there. So that was my original guess. It could very well be. And Julian Assange could very well be stateside. I'm not so sure. Q is saying no, and I don't think Q would tell us either way, to be honest with you. You can let me know what you think below. Let's move on. Post 2614, 52 minutes after the hour of 6. Q is responding to an Anon who asks if this is a stress test, meaning this Q&A session. And Q says, yes, added servers, bandwidth, improved performance. So for those of you who are newer to QAnon, Q has done a couple Q&A sessions before. And what happens when Q does a Q&A session is that lots of people flood the boards because they want to get their questions answered, or they just want to see what's going on. So we really see how many people are paying attention to QAnon. And this also allows QAnon to communicate with the Code Monkey, being the board operator of 8chan, to kind of decide how much bandwidth to allow to sort of monitor how many people are getting on the boards. It allows them to decide what to do. And so that's essentially what this is, a stress test. And Q is simply confirming that. Let's move on to 2615, 54 minutes after the hour of 6 p.m. And Anon says, Q, should we be prepping for some kind of shutdown? Q says, no. Reports of power grid attacks, 6 months prep should be disregarded. While attacks do occur, we are safeguarded by a black eye. Well, I think it's always good to be, if you've got 6 months prep, you're never sitting in a bad position because you never know if there's going to be some sort of power grid attack or anything like that. Now, Q seems to not feel very threatened by that. But like I said, just as in general, it's probably always good to be, prep for 6 months worth of food and water and whatnot. Q says, while attacks do occur, we are safeguarded by a black eye. What's this black eye we're talking about? Well, I tend to think that Q is referencing some sort of satellite system, maybe, perhaps over a black site. Could be in regards to the Black Knight satellite, who I really never have ever thought we've gotten all the information in regards to that. Hard to really say. This could very well be more than just a satellite. This could be something that actually protects, for EMP attacks or something like that. It's really, really hard to know what kind of situation we've got going on. We just had SpaceX launching another rocket out into space the other day. We know that they've been sending up satellites. Facebook has been sending up satellites. Everybody's been sending up satellites, particularly over the last couple years. So I imagine this is referring to some sort of satellite system that is safeguarding, like I said, not just for comms and things like that, but in case of power grid attacks, EMP attacks, and things like that. So I would maybe look towards the Black Knight satellite or some sort of technology that is like that. You guys can let me know what you think. 2616. 55 minutes after the hour of 6. We get this tweet right here. Melania will be interviewed by Sean Hannity tonight at Fox News at 9 p.m. And this says 0 Delta Q POTUS. This was in regards to the tweets and this Q&A session with Q. It looks like this Anon was assuming that this was right. This tweet came right at the same time as either a Q post or this question from an Anon. Q is saying not intended, separated by 2 minutes, being that I'm assuming that the president's tweet doesn't really have anything cryptic in it, was just simply advertising Melania on Fox News at Sean Hannity. So we'll be watching that at 9 o'clock, and hopefully I will be back up again watching that with you guys, but it looks like this was pretty innocuous. Let's go ahead and move on then. 2617, 56 minutes after the hour of 6. Is internet infrastructure being safeguarded to prevent shutdown? Q says NSA ability to overreach hosts possible. Okay, well, that's a big reach for NSA, and that always kind of creeps me out. Now, of course, it's nice to know when you think they're the white hats, if you will, but that's always kind of worried me. But as far as in relation to the internet, it seems like we might be sitting a little bit prettier. I think just even a couple months ago, I think we all thought we were going to get shut down, and it very well may be the case. Even if it is the case, I'm sure Q may not give us a warning. It's hard to really know. It wouldn't surprise me if Q did give us a warning, though. But it seems to me like Q is saying that they've got the ability to go ahead and take care of that at this point. I know that I've had a little bit less issue with, in particular, this platform on YouTube. So maybe that is the case. Looks like NSA's got it under control, but do we have NSA under control? That would be the better question, right? Let's move on. 2618. 59 minutes after the hour 6. Will FLOTUS confirm anything on Hannity tonight? Q says only her beauty and love of country. Nice. 2619. 1 minute after the hour 7. Do we have the gold? Q says yes. Gold shall destroy Fed. Q. Yeah, if you've been paying attention, it really hasn't just been the USA, but nations around the world, particularly Russia, as of late, have been sort of repatriating their gold, which leads me to think that we are under some serious restructure going on. And if you remember, Q has mentioned that we are not planning to abolish the Fed, but likely restructure the Fed. And of course, that's why the Fed is raising rates and trying to put the squeeze on everybody. They want to make sure this looks as ugly as possible for Donald Trump when it comes down to 2020, because that might be their next Hail Mary that they make. It looks like midterms was kind of a wash for them. And that's about all they have to look for. So they're probably going to try and make this as bad as possible to make Trump look as bad as possible, because really everything's going fairly well, including the economy. So if they put the squeeze on the economy, then that would have the potential to make President Trump look really bad. But of course, if we have gold and we're able to actually go by some sort of tangible based currency, that might negate a lot of things. Now, again, I'm no economist, but it seems to me like that would be in play. Q is saying, yes, gold shall destroy Fed. And if, of course, you remember way back in the day, your dollar used to be backed by gold. And of course, now it's not even worth the paper it's printed on. So this is very good news for all of us, even if it means a little bit of pain, before getting to sort of the long goal, but very exciting news indeed. 2620. 8 minutes after the hour of 7. Q is responding to an Anon on 8chan who is asking about 2588, post 2588, this 10Q. Q is talking about Google's 10Q filing with the SEC. My assumption would be for their 331.19 or 630.19 10Q filing. Well, that's what I thought too. It was their quarterly filing, and Q is saying that assumption is correct. 10K yearly earnings 2019. 1 plus 2 should be closely evaluated. Help will be provided. Okay, so we've yet to see that, but we did talk a little bit yesterday about Google CEO Sundar Pichai, who is selling off tons and tons of Googly share. What's going on? Are you preparing for something? And then, of course, we had that little fire in China on the top of the roof where the Google offices were. My goodness, what's going on? What are they trying to hide? Well, it looks like the Senate is to investigate 2019, and we're only weeks away from that. 2621, 10 minutes after the hour 7. Anon says, will voter fraud in California ever be brought to light? And Q says, yes. Watch, California was deliberate. Well, this is a very, very important state, and we'll have to see how this plays out. I think Florida is still going to play out too. Just because Q said in these past posts here, what was it, 2610, saying that the voter fraud wouldn't be exposed before January. Well, it's only a few weeks. After January, he didn't say anything about that. So I think we're still going to see some things going on. I would love to see what goes on with this Brenda Snipes out there in Florida. But we know there was election fraud. It's just a matter of when we're going to see it. We've still yet to see the DHS report on election fraud, voter fraud. That, of course, was one of the things that kind of got pushed back. But that remains to be seen. We've still yet to see it. And that should be coming up in the next few days. Hopefully that will bring something to light. But Q says, watch, California was deliberate. Q also told us to watch New York. 2622, 12 minutes after the hour of 7. And Anon says, just to shut the flat earthers up, Q. Is the earth flat? Q says, no, Q. So, okay. I'm going to move on from that one. 2623, 16 minutes after the hour of 7 p.m. Is Gitmo going to be used for U.S. citizens? Cabal. Q says 3 detention centers being prepped. Monitor funding. Well, I've talked at great length, and I've referred you a few times now back to my omnibus study video where we talked about the funding going into Guantanamo. Looks like we're talking about a couple other detention centers, not talking necessarily about military installations. And I think Q might be referring to some sort of converted private prisons. We talked about that actually a few months ago. Some of you remember I posed the question to you guys, how did you feel about the private prison situation? And of course, I'm not a big fan of it, and I think many of you agreed with me. But this was in reference to people who are not foreign nationals and not protected under the Constitution. They were looking at opening up a couple of centers, and I believe one of them was in New York. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure one was in New York. I'm not sure where the other one was, but I believe these were private facilities, and I have a feeling we're going to start seeing this seep out into the news a little bit more too. But we do know that President Trump has kept it a priority to keep Guantanamo Bay open, and of course a lot of people were trying to close that, and we know exactly why, because they didn't exactly want their key to the room. But it looks like that's staying open. The money is there, a lot of growth down there. It looks like they're preparing for a lot of new neighbors, and then of course we saw a couple different deployments out there too. So it looks like we're going to get some activity down there south of Florida. 2624, 1919, 19 minutes after 7. Q, please tell us who or what the wizards and warlocks are. And Q says guardians of intelligence. Okay. Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I have a feeling that this is a lot of our operators in the sky, whether it's satellite operators, whether they be spy plane operators, could be fighter plane operators. I believe that these are our wizards and warlocks, the guys who are intercepting all the messages going through the sky, intercepting those possible EMP attacks, or who knows what's going on. But that was my hunch before, and I'm sticking with that. Q says guardians of intelligence. I think that makes a pretty good case for what I'm trying to say there. I believe those are our wizards and warlocks. And then 2625, 23 minutes after the hour of 7, Q says, and stress test failed. So it looks like we got too many people for 8chan. We're going to have to try it again, but that's a good thing. It means that we've got a lot of people. It means we're probably going to try another Q&A again, and we'll just keep going. Now 8chan should still be working. It just seems to have failed this stress test, meaning that there were so many people trying to get on that some people were probably getting errors and whatnot, and probably getting bumped offline. So if that happened to you, don't worry about it. That's precisely what Q is talking about, and I'm sure they will make their adjustments accordingly. Okay, those are your Q posts. Sorry I had to cruise through so quick, but like I said, after the putting together last video, I had already done that for hours, and then it took me on about another 4 or 5 to fix this program. So I wanted to get this out for you, and you know, I know you guys have probably covered a lot of these already, but those are my, at least my short takes on these, if you will. And I am going to let you go because I'm exhausted. I'm ready to get some sleep, and I have a feeling Q's going to be posting in another few hours. So if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. And thanks to all of you who already do that. And if you didn't like this video, you can always click like, share, and subscribe, and just feel good about your good deed for the day, I suppose. I don't know. If you're new to my channel, welcome to you. And keep in mind that from time to time you will be unclicked and unliked and unsubscribed. That's how it works here on social media these days. All my links are down below. My Gab, my BitChute, my Real.video, which is now Brighteon.com, my email, and if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon keeps me in my seat making these videos for you guys. All those links are down below, and of course I'm over on Twitter at IPOT1776. That's at IPOT1776. All those links are always down below. All right, kids, this is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay awake.